All right, let's get right into it. Most of the dating advice out there is full of the same old stuff, right? Just be yourself, be nice, be honest. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if the kind of cold, hard strategies that build empires could actually be used to win someone's heart? This explainer is going to dive into some pretty controversial material that says yes, they can. We're talking about a series of laws for attraction that are, well, as powerful as they are genuinely dangerous.
And that really brings us to the big central question here. I mean, can you really take the playbook of a 16th century political advisor, a guy who literally wrote the book on how rulers should use cunning, fear, and illusion to stay in power, and apply that to your love life, to something so personal and intimate? It sounds cynical, doesn't it? Maybe even a little dark. But the source material we're breaking down today makes a bold claim. Yes, you absolutely can.
So here's how we're going to approach this. We are going to walk through 4 specific laws of attraction, and these ideas come from thinkers like Machiavelli and Robert Greene. But, and listen, this is the most important part. We have to treat this like a manual for the extremely cautious. Every single law comes with a huge warning label. You're walking a tightrope between what might be an effective strategy and what is, frankly, just manipulation. It's about understanding the power, for sure, but it's even more about understanding the peril. Okay, let's start with law number 1. It gets right to the core of Machiavelli's whole philosophy. It's called the virtuous performance, and it flies directly in the face of that just be yourself advice. The idea here is that in the very early stages of attraction, your raw, unfiltered self might not be your best foot forward. Instead, it's all about crafting a perception.
You see, Machiavelli argued that people judge leaders, and by extension, potential romantic partners, based on what they see on the surface. He literally wrote that people judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. What he meant was, they react to how you appear to be, to your actions, not to your deep, complicated, hidden inner self. And the point is, in the theater of courtship, you're on a stage. The character you present is what's going to capture the imagination.
So, how does this actually play out? Well, the strategy is basically a 2-level game. On the public level, you're projecting this idealized version of yourself. You are the picture of courtesy, patience, and reliability. You listen with your full attention, you show respect, you seem totally honorable. Your manners just seem effortless, totally natural. But privately, you are the strategist. You're not just sitting back and hoping things work out. No, you are methodically planning your next steps, how to get that first date, when to try and deepen the intimacy, how to guide the whole thing forward. The source material points to someone like Cleopatra. She didn't just captivate Caesar with her charm. She did it by presenting herself as a divine and worthy queen, masking her own desperate political situation behind this incredible performance. But here it is, the first major warning, and please take this one seriously. This law is a massive double-edged sword. The power? Yeah, it's in creating this image of the perfect partner, which can absolutely inspire deep respect and desire. But the danger? It's catastrophic. If that performance gets exposed, if she ever finds out that the virtues you were showing off were just a front for a calculated strategy, the trust doesn't just break, it shatters. That feeling of being played, of being manipulated, can be so profoundly hurtful that it leads to a brutal, immediate shutdown, or even worse, retaliation. This tactic is right on the edge of dishonesty, and if you're going to use it, you are walking an incredibly fine line.
And that leads us straight into our second law, the fearful heart. Now, this one is probably the most controversial of all, and it demands the absolute most caution. It takes Machiavelli's infamous question, is it better to be loved or to be feared? And it applies it directly to the dynamics of passion and romance. Now, let's be crystal clear. The strategy here is not about being cruel. It's not about being intimidating. It's about creating a very subtle, very strategic imbalance. So on one side, you're fueling her desire with all the good stuff, affection, romance, attention. But on the other side, you introduce a tiny, controlled dose of fear, the fear of losing you. The source argues that while love can be unreliable, that little bit of anxiety, that fear of losing something you value, can actually amplify passion. It's the difference between being a predictable comfort and being a cherished prize. And this right here, this is the most critical warning in this entire explainer.
This law doesn't just border on manipulation. It's one step away from causing genuine emotional harm. Yes, the power is in that push and pull of warmth and coolness to keep her interest high. But it is so easy to mishandle this, and the damage can be severe. The goal is a tiny flicker of tension, not a hurricane of anxiety. If your actions start to cause real insecurity, if they damage her self-esteem or make her feel unsafe in any way, you've crossed a major ethical line. Even Machiavelli warns that a prince has to avoid being hated at all costs. Well, in romance, that's 1,000 times more true. Making someone doubt their own worth isn't a strategy for seduction. It's a recipe for a truly toxic dynamic. Okay, moving on to our third law. This one shifts gears a bit from these big, grand strategies to something more like psychological observation. It's called the hidden pattern, and it pulls from the work of Robert Greene. Here, we're moving away from projecting an image of ourselves and more toward decoding the person who's right in front of you. This is a much more subtle tool, and it's potentially much more intimate. So the big idea here is what's called the law of compulsive behavior. The thinking is that we are all creatures of habit, especially when it comes to our emotions. The patterns that were formed in our childhood and our past relationships, they create this kind of psychological script that we just follow, usually without even realizing it. We tend to react to stress, to affection, to conflict in these predictable ways. According to this source, a master seducer doesn't just ignore these patterns, they learn how to read them. They become a sort of amateur psychologist, always looking for those recurring themes in her story.
You basically become an observer. You start asking yourself these kinds of questions. When she talks about her past, do you hear the same stories over and over? Maybe stories of betrayal or stories of adventure. And in the moment, when you tease her a little bit, does she light up and play along, or does she kind of shut down? Is she someone who seems to need a lot of approval, or is she someone who's always testing your boundaries? Every single reaction is a clue, a piece of the puzzle to her deeper emotional wiring. And if you can identify that script, you can learn how to connect with her on a level that feels deeply intuitive. But again, here comes that ethical tightrope. The power of this law is huge. When you align what you do with her emotional patterns, you can seem incredibly empathetic, incredibly intuitive. She feels seen, she feels understood, but the danger is just as big. This can feel deeply invasive. I mean, nobody wants to feel like they're a science experiment. And even worse, if you identify a real vulnerability, like say a deep fear of abandonment, and then you deliberately exploit that pattern to make her more dependent on you, well, that is a profound ethical breach. This law absolutely demands respect. Use these insights to connect, to comfort, not to stereotype, not to label, and definitely not to manipulate. And that brings us to our fourth and final law, the power of distance. This is all about managing your presence and your absence. We're back in Robert Greene's territory here with what he calls the law of coquetry. And the argument is pretty simple. Sometimes pulling back is way more powerful than pushing forward. The core idea? You become an object of desire by staying just a little bit of an enigma. It's human nature to value what's scarce, what's just out of our reach. If you are always available, always reassuring, you risk becoming, well, predictable, a little boring even. The coquette, as the source describes them, understands this completely. They create suspense by delaying satisfaction. They make themselves slightly elusive so that getting their attention feels like winning a prize, not just something that's a given. The whole strategy works in a kind of rhythm. First, you lean in. You give warmth, you give attention, you give affection, you make her feel totally special and desired. This is the pull, the part that draws her closer to you. Then, right when she's feeling secure and comfortable, you pull back. Now, this isn't some harsh rejection. It's a subtle creation of distance. You get a little busier. Your texts become a little less over the top. You maintain a part of your life that is completely 100% your own. This is the push that gets her thinking, gets her wondering. See, the real engine of this law is delayed satisfaction. You end a fantastic date on a high note, leaving her wanting just a little bit more. You create this state of anticipation where she's thinking about you even when you're not around, trying to figure you out. That's what keeps her emotionally engaged and eager for the next time she sees you. And here we are, the final crucial warning for this law. There is a razor-thin line between creating a playful, exciting kind of suspense and just being perceived as cruel. If you pull away too far or too often or too coldly, it's not going to feel like an intriguing mystery. It's going to feel like a mean game. It'll cause confusion, frustration, and real hurt. The whole point is to make her miss your presence, not to make her doubt your sincerity. Balance is literally everything. You have to come back with that warmth before she just gives up in frustration. This is about suspense, not emotional neglect.
So, we've just walked through 4 powerful and, let's be honest, pretty dangerous laws of attraction. We've seen how these principles, taken from political strategy and psychological observation, can be applied to the art of seduction. But now, we need to pull it all together into one final, overarching message. We need to tie all these warnings together under one key virtue: prudence. Look, when you put it all together, you've got a pretty potent strategy. You project virtue, you balance affection with a hint of authority, you learn to read her emotional rhythms, and you keep an air of mystery about you. But look at that final point. It's highlighted for a reason. None of this works, or let me rephrase that, none of this is ethical without that non-negotiable foundation of empathy and respect. Every single one of these tactics must be filtered through that lens. The conclusion from the source material really says it all. True attraction grows from mutual respect as much as from psychological skill. You can master every psychological trick in the book, but if it isn't grounded in genuine respect for the other person, you're not building attraction, you're building a house of cards. Your skill might get you some attention, sure, but only respect can build a real, lasting, meaningful connection. So, the ultimate takeaway has to be this. These strategies are just tools, and like any tool, they can be used to build something beautiful, or they can be used to cause a lot of damage. Their purpose should be to enhance a connection, to create excitement, to show that you are invested enough to actually be thoughtful. They should never, ever be used to replace sincerity, to betray someone's confidence, or to break the most fragile and valuable asset in any relationship: trust. You have to guard that, always. And so we're going to end here with a question for you to really think about. These laws, they offer power. They offer a potential path to winning in what people call the game of love. But every single move comes with a risk. Not just a risk to her feelings, but a risk to your own character. So the real question is a strategic victory actually worth that risk? Is winning someone's affection worth sacrificing a piece of your own integrity? That is something only you can answer for yourself.